Welcome, everyone. On behalf of Bicycle Alliance of Minnesota, Our Streets Minneapolis, and the Bike Film Festival, thank you all for joining us to talk about advocacy in the Twin Cities and fostering a better biking community and culture. Your co-hosts for this panel are myself, Maya Sheikh with Bicycle Alliance of Minnesota, Emily Wade with Our Streets Minneapolis.
Awesome. Thanks for starting us off, Maya, and thank you so much to all of our panelists for being here today. So we'd like to just kick stuff off by having you all introduce yourselves and share a little bit about how bikes came to be important in your life and the role that they play now. Louis, would you mind starting us off?
Sure. My name is Louis Moore. I'm the president of the Major Taylor Bicycling Club of Minnesota. We have been around for 21 years. It's predominantly put together as a bicycle club for the African American community. When we started this organization, we started out with about 4 or 5 people. Our current membership is somewhere between 50 and 60 members. And we've just been a part of the community. We put it all together to try to encourage the African American community to become physically active, to deal with some of the medical issues that seem to just permeate through our community, diabetes, people overweight, heart disease. And we thought the best way to approach those issues was through physical activity. And so we put this group together on my deck back here behind the house in 1999 and started riding in the year 2000. And been riding ever since. And we even have maybe 3 or 4, well, 5 of the original club members still part of the club. So I guess that says something about longevity.
Awesome. Thank you. I'm excited to hear more about that. And Dr. Zapata, could you share a little bit about yourself and also what role bikes play in your life?
Absolutely. So excited to be here. Thank you again for inviting me. My name is Dr. Ashley Zapata. I'm a clinical and sports psychologist, and I offer mental health and performance services to youth, collegiate, and professional teams here in the Twin Cities. And when I'm not doing that, I'm serving as the board president of Stamina Racing Collective, Machines for Freedom. And that was a team, or is a team, that began over the summer of 2020, before I even got to Minnesota. So this is my first winter. And it really started because there was something lacking in the way of diversifying the competitive sport of cycling. And so team members and myself got together and decided we wanted to do something about that. So I've casually been riding a bike since I can remember, and fondest memories are as a child, just riding, no qualms, no concerns, just free, and really wanting to feel that again as an adult with bills and responsibilities and all of these different injustices and things that are just right in front of my face every day. So really wanting a space that could just be for me, and showing that to other people who share identities that I hold, and share that also with my kids. So super excited about the role that I get to play in that story, and really bringing that to the forefront and identifying the gaps that there currently are in cycling. So thank you again for having me here.
Thank you. Madilynn, would you mind going next?
Yeah, thanks for having me. My name is Madilynn Garcia. I grew up in Texas and spent some time in Portland, Oregon before moving to the Twin Cities in 2017. I moved across the country with a few boxes and a dog. I moved here with very few things. I knew a total of 4 people. And I got here, late August, and, before I found a place to live, I went and bought a bike. I looked online and I went to, at the time, the only solo female owned bike shop in the Twin Cities, which is Cherry Cycles. and I just fell in love with the Twin Cities by riding around on this cute little single speed. That is how I engaged in community and met people, and just really quickly knew that this is the place that I wanted to be. I ended up working in a bike shop for a few years before returning to the nonprofit world. And so working in a bike shop and being a buyer and kind of diving into that industry was fun and challenging. I feel very fortunate that the place I worked was very forward thinking and very much a part of advocacy in the bike community, especially for femme trans women folks. But really wanted to see that pushed in the industry at large, right? And so when I left the bike shop, I felt like there was this thing missing, right? Like even as I was working on like racial equity work in my personal life and in my work life, I felt like I needed to have that in all the areas that mattered to me. And so when Stamina Racing was being founded, I immediately knew that that is where I wanted to be and the work that I wanted to continue doing in a community of really, really bright, enthusiastic people who would dive headfirst into change making. And so that's what has brought me here, and excited to chat with folks.
Awesome. Thank you, Madilynn. Wesley, would you mind introducing yourself and telling us just a little bit about the role bikes play in your life?
Yeah, I first really fell in love with biking after a terrible day in Chicago while riding public transit, and just decided to get off the train where it was right above a bike shop, took all the money out of my wallet, bought a fixie, and just haven't taken public transportation since. So it did start off on somewhat of a petty level, but I did quickly fall in love with cycling. When I moved back to Minneapolis, I grew up here also, but when I moved back, I really wanted to just keep up with cycling, but noticed that the world here wasn't as integrated as it was with how it was in Chicago. It was very still segregated and somewhat gate-kept in cycling. So my passion for it kind of fell off for a little bit till I started myself working at a bike shop, and then really got involved with advocacy and helping people, because that shop really did a lot to try to help people. Then last summer when everything took off, we knew that our shop was in a position that this is what it was basically made to do, so just do it. And we would do guide services for people who worked over north to get to downtown, or over south to get over north. Whole bunch of riding around just to make sure people are safe. We had a emergency repair service for anybody in protest. There were nights that we'd be getting texts like, "Hey, I got a flat, like there's a tank outside, but someone will help you. I really hope someone can." And everybody did get serviced for the most part. Then yeah, ever since I've been really trying to stay in the world of cycling with my work. I recently started working over at Donkey Label, so I'm trying to keep the role of representation going on there. And this summer, me and the guys from Biking with Wesley are going out and making a full-length documentary about the normalization of Black people in the cycling community.
Wow, thank you. I look forward to that documentary. That sounds like a really awesome project. Paige, would you mind introducing yourself and just sharing a little bit about how bikes show up in your life?
Sure. Hey, I'm Paige. I use she, her pronouns. Now newly based in St. Paul as of about 2 months ago. And originally lived between Minneapolis and New York. And so I was able to kind of like experience a couple of different bike related memories. But for me, living in a Minneapolis suburb, bikes were my ticket to freedom. It was just like, great, I can take up space, I can get to where I want to go, I don't have to wait for anyone. It was like a symbol of like, I don't know, like a powerful social group, you and all your friends like mobbing up and getting on bikes and just like being in the world. And I think um, that is what I appreciate about throwing bike rides and centering like Black folks now, is just like reconnecting with like what it means to take up space, like take up street space. We've done that like so much with all of the all of the protests and demonstrations and celebrations. But there's something about that speed and being mobile and like really moving together that I really love and appreciate. So it's definitely a community thing for me.
That's wonderful. Thank you all so much for your answers. Our next question is, how does your identity impact your experience as a bike rider? If anybody wants to take that off the bat.
Well, I think for our group, our club, when we came on the scene in 2000, a lot of people were very inquisitive about Black folks on bicycles. So for us, it was a matter of getting out there and teaching society that, yes, Black folks do ride bicycles. One of the first experiences that we had, I think we were a little more than a year old. We had a group of about 15 of our club members riding up Park Avenue. We came to 42nd Street to stop for a light, and a Minneapolis squad car rode up next to us. And the cop rolled down the window and he looked out and he said, well, what is this? And we're all out there in these yellow jerseys and, you know, which said Major Taylor on them. And he looked at us and I said, well, we're a bike club. And he said, he looked at his partner and laughed and he said, well, that's a different kind of gang, and rolled up the window and rode off. So that kind of gave us an idea of what the perception of our group was, you know, physically being on the street. And that was 20 some years ago. And it's been interesting ever since. I mean, there's still groups of people who have this tendency to ask ridiculous questions about people of color riding bicycles. Now I'm considerably older than all of you, so I have seen a lot and I have experienced a lot on a bicycle, both here locally and in Chicago, Wesley, and in New York. And, you know, I have done rides from Denver to Minneapolis. And that was a real experience because people were constantly asking you who you are and why you're out here and what you're doing and why are you doing it. I've done rides from Minneapolis to Chicago, 3 of them. I've done rides from Minneapolis to Toledo, Ohio. So when you're out there in various communities on the highway, I mean, we're riding road bikes. You learn a lot from people and people learn a lot from you. And that's the important part. You have got to educate people, even to this point. I mean, as a group last summer, we were out riding last summer and this guy came by and said, wow, I've never seen a group like this. Now, you know, we've been out there for 20 years. It was in a northern suburb, but this guy, I mean, he actually rode his bike as fast as he could to catch us to make that comment. And I said, well, you know, come join us, you know, join the club, get a jersey, come out and ride. And, oh, I'm going to do that. I'm going to do that. And of course, we get that all the time. But it's just a matter of being out there and making sure that people understand that our community is part of this sport as well. Back a few years ago, we jumped into the races down here on 48th Street, Southside Sprints. And I thought it was important as a club to do that because the racing community here in Minnesota has very few Black people involved. And so we got involved, and one of our racers won a third place in the citizens race. And everybody thought, oh, they're a racing club. I can't ride with them. And that's perception is a major problem here for a lot of folks riding bikes, lots of folks in color riding bikes. So, it's been a matter of us just trying to educate the community, both Black and white, about the freedom and the transportation and the fun of cycling.
Louis, I love that so much. And also, I want to push back against the old comment. I feel like there's so much wisdom that comes from you that I refuse to call you old, and choose to lean on the reverence of your wisdom instead. And thank you for all of the work and the way that you paved. As far as my identity in cycling is concerned, what really got me into the competitive space was being in a very difficult marriage, challenging space. And one night watching a documentary that was showcasing the race across America. And it was focusing on an ultra cyclist, female identified ultra cyclist, who also identified as a white woman. And this was my first ever knowing about this race from Oceanside, California to Annapolis, Maryland, which were both two areas that I've both lived and had very personal experiences in. And so initially it was like, what are the odds of that? But watched this documentary, and the first thing I thought to myself was, I don't see anyone that looks like me. I'm from Panama originally and have Caribbean roots. My dad's from Trinidad. And so I tend to look at things from this lens of where are the Caribbean people in any kind of space, but also where are Black people in any kind of space. And that was my first reaction was, I don't see anyone that looks like me. Is this not a race that like allows Black people, or what's happening? Or is there just no interest? And like my brain was tinkering on all of these questions very quickly. But the thing that stood out to me the most was, I want to do that. I want to be a part of that. I don't know what's involved. I don't know what it takes. I don't know the names of half the things they're talking about, but there was something about that space that just felt like, well, why can't I be there? And the partner that I was with at the time like laughed and scoffed and was like, there's no way you can do that, which just fueled me even more to do it, because they told me I couldn't do it. And I really couldn't see any rational reason why I could not or should not do it. And I think that really continues to speak to why I'm on this team, why diversifying the sport of cycling is such a hallmark in what we do, because it's not that there's a lack of Black or Caribbean identified riders. Absolutely not. Mentorship and support in what we're doing is key. Prior to June of 2020, I didn't know what most of the components of a bike were even called, aside from a pedal and the handlebars. To be quite honest with you, I just knew get on, pedal, move, foundation. And since being on my team, the support that we've rallied, not just amongst our team, but in the community, has really motivated and encouraged me to not just pedal, but really show up in racing spaces and be unapologetic about showing up in that space. So Paige, you mentioned taking up space, not just on the road, but in life. And that's huge as far as my identity is concerned, because I deserve to take up space. You know, the essence of who I am deserves space, and to have that shared and not have that stifled. So that really, in a nutshell, is how I view my identity in cycling.
Yeah, that was actually very great. Sorry, I also wanted to say how great yours was, but I've always viewed my identity in cycling because like I'm a 6 foot black man in my 20s. I fit every description for any crime right now. They're looking for me. I didn't do anything, but they're looking for me. When I really started getting into cycling, I was like, oh, let me get rid of these old bikes I just don't want anymore and put them up on the post, on the Twin Cities trading post on Facebook. I got 3 messages asking, who did I steal these from? It's like, no one. I bought them from a shop somewhere else. Like, call them. Like, I shouldn't have to prove myself. Then the amount of times I've been stopped on my bikes just to ask, like, where did I get this? Why do I have it? Just like, well, it's none of your business. That's real talk. I don't care if you just want to make conversation about it. You don't stop half the people at any of the single track parking lots to talk about their bikes, Mr. Park Ranger. You don't stop anybody on the Greenway to talk about their bikes. But I find myself more times than not riding my bike, and next thing I know, I see the lights behind me asking, oh, yep, no, we got a report of this bike was stolen. And I'm sitting here knowing my bottom bracket memorized now to the point, because I've been tested on it so many times. I'm just like, yeah, this is the number. Check it. And it's also to the point that I'm like, not to brag or anything, but if somebody else has a bike exactly like mine, yo, show them me. Like, that person will be my friend because I know I built my bike that nobody else has it. One, because I messed up the fork and it's 2 different colors and the tape is falling off. But whatever, it's very my bike. So I've always wanted to make a space make a space. We've all said it now. In the cycling community to just make sure that people can ride their bike. It shouldn't have to come with the homework of knowing your bike laws, having them stitched into your frame bag just in case if anything goes wrong and a cop wants to flip over your bike and empty it out. So you have to stitch the laws into your bag knowing that that's illegal. They can't do that. But I have friends complaining that that's happened to them multiple times. And that's what's put us over the edge to really get out there and make a lane for people like us in the bike world.
Thank you for that, Wesley. I was just thinking about the fact that it feels like there's something about just riding bikes that I love in the sense that it centers that joy. And at the same time, sometimes it feels as if doing anything or just like creating something for the sake of creating it as like a person of color or Black folks in particular leading other Black people, that it's like the statement. I just, during Juneteenth, we just wanted to arrange a bike ride with Black people, and that was it. It wasn't, and the amount of people that were asking if we were protesting, like what's the message? And it's like, the message is that we just wanted to link up and ride bikes. That's the message, that we wanted to just do something together, like on a holiday that, especially during the pandemic, folks were really latching on to tradition and community. And so that, I think, is something that I've been thinking about in terms of the way that my identity intersects, is that even in the most unintentional ways, at times it feels like everything that I'm doing is political, whenever I'm trying to like just arrange for us to be able to be out in nature and be out in the world, and experience, and understand our relationships with these things in a different way. So I'm definitely sitting with that right now.
I might mention that Major Taylor used to do the rides for the Juneteenth event in North Minneapolis. That was always an interesting experience, you know, even from our own community. People would look at you and say, "What are y'all doing? Why are y'all out here in that stuff?" So you'd have to educate even your own community, plus the white community.
Absolutely.
I'm really grateful to be here with folks that have been creating space for decades, right? This isn't new, right? And so I'm really grateful for the work that the people here do, and want to acknowledge the very personal challenge it presents. The internal and the external, and I, as a Latina queer woman, can show up in these spaces and am often seen as like more palatable or easier to talk to, and less confrontational. And my role and my identity, I do what I can to lean into that, and then push back in the spaces that I am able. And I think that catches some people off guard. I think it puts some people off, and that is a-okay. And at the end of the day, and at the end of the season, like everything that I'm a part of, right, on Stamina, every space that I show up in, related to the bike industry, like it needs to be prioritizing the safety and the future of Black cyclists. And I am able to show up and do that because as a non-Black person of color, as a cis woman, and there are, I think, a lot of outdated things in the bike industry, in the bike world, that need to go. I think that it is hard for folks to hear things like, "We don't say that anymore," or "You can't talk like that in this space," right? Like we're not okay with that. And so I hope that every other non-Black cyclist can start stepping up and can start pushing back in the ways that they are able, because it's incumbent upon all of us to do that, so that we can have a safer, more welcoming community for generations to come.
And if I could just add one more thing, and I know we're going to switch the question soon. Something that really stands out to me as a Afro-Caribbean, Panamanian, Black, cisgendered female rider is that my lived experience of just being in the world has always been in a box, or with constraints, and with expectations, and with limitations and boundaries, and this is how you should be in this space, and this is how you should be in that space, and this is how you got to navigate around that to fit into that particular space. And so lived experience. And so for me, being on my bike, and in particular doing endurance rides, I did a virtual ride for 24 hours, well, 15 hours. I didn't do the whole 24, but next time. People were like, why do you do that? Like, what is it that makes you want to just keep riding? And for me, it's like, well, when I'm on my bike, the only limitation is whatever I put in front of myself. It's really just about boundlessness. And for someone who's lived in spaces where someone else has always had an idea of how I should be or how I should move, that is gold. To have a few moments of just being able to go, just go, and just be. I don't think there are enough words in any language to really describe what that means for someone who's lived in constraint, and who knows that their ancestral history has also been very much in constraint and quite literally bondage. So to be free and to say like being on the bike makes me feel free is so much bigger than what the dictionary definition of that word is for me. And that directly correlates with how I identify as a person in the world and what I want to show my kids. You know, I have 3 beautiful kids, two girls, 1 boy, and they're going to go through life as children of color, as Black children. And they're going to face all kinds of things. And I want them to know that there are spaces that they get to choose their own limits or remove limits in a world that would say otherwise. So I wanted to throw that in there.
Well, as a Black man, I've been riding bikes over 60 years. A lot of what you say is exactly how I have felt the whole time. And that goes back 60 years ago.
Thank you all so much for sharing those experiences. It's really impactful. And thank you to Madilynn for that call to action for non-Black bikers as well. Some of you all have already talked about this, and Paige, I was really struck too by your comment about how, you know, whether you like it or not, riding bikes as a group of Black people is politicized. And I wanted to just open it up to other panelists as well. I think a lot of people talk about bikes as a vehicle for social change. And I just wanted to see like how you all feel about that. Do you think it's true? Do you think it's not true? So I'll just open that up to everyone.
I'll start it off. Yes, it's true. And I live 6 blocks from 38th in Chicago. So I live 6 blocks from one of the most heinous crimes ever committed in Minneapolis. And this community around here has been incredibly impacted by what has happened. The few nights after George Floyd was killed, or actually about a week or 2, we in this neighborhood were patrolling, literally patrolling till 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning because of all of the folks coming from other parts of the country, other parts of the state, into the city, doing what they were doing. Since that event, I have lost my local Walgreens. I have lost one of the local restaurants that was, you know, a stellar part of the community. It was Kern's on 42nd and Nicollet. I'm now losing my Wells Fargo Bank down on 47th in Chicago. I even lost my dollar store on 46th and Nicollet. I mean, what has happened has had a big impact on the community as a whole. And when about, I don't know, 3 or 4 days after, or about a week or so after it happened, you know, they put the mural up. There were 6 club members out riding. We stopped and took a picture of us kneeling in front of the mural, put it on Facebook nationwide, and you can't believe the response to that. Just because the club was a part of that, but just because how sad people were as to what happened. And we heard about it all the time, constantly. And it still hasn't, settled down. And I don't really ever think it's going to. I'm glad to hear that this corner is going to be memorialized in his name. And I do hope it's going to be turned into a roundabout with maybe some sort of memorial in the middle of the street, actually, saying this happened here. And it needs to be, it needs to happen. It needs to happen that way. So the community feels comfortable, so that people in the state who care feel comfortable, and people around the world feel comfortable. Because you got this trial coming up next month, and the world is going to be watching. And if this situation doesn't come out in a way that is in a proper manner, in other words, this man being put in prison for most of his life, if not all of it, you're going to have more reaction to it. So, even as cyclists, whenever we're out riding, or we have someone that has come to ride with the club, or someone from out of town, I mean, that's the first place they want to go. And, you know, so it's going to have to be put together properly. People are going to have to accept it, the community as a whole, both black and white. The police department's going to have to accept it. Actually, my daughter and I know the chief, and we know, you know, how Arredondo thinks. And I think he's probably the best person in place right now versus the situation to represent the city of Minneapolis. But there's still a lot of people on the opposite side of the fence we have to defend. And it's important. It's an important part of all of our lives. And it will be from here on in.
I think that, to Louis' point, absolutely, cycling is certainly a vessel for social change and advocacy. But also, I think anything can be. Anyone can be, any organization can be, any sport can be, anything can be a vessel for change if that is the decision that's being made by you as an individual and the collective group as a whole. And I think there's a lot of power in that is often overlooked. You don't have to have a title or an official position to make change. You don't have to be 60, you don't have to be 20. You can be any age, any race, any creed, any background, anything. As long as you, I think, have the intention and the purpose to share a message that calls the attention of what's happening through a truthful lens. And that can be uncomfortable. And most people shy away from it because it's uncomfortable. And we live in a world where we don't like discomfort, and we like things, you know, within a matter of 5 seconds. And, you know, that's just how it's been. But that's not how change is made. Change takes intentionality. Change takes time at some moments. But I don't say that to mean like, oh, it's going to take time, so we might as well not do it. No, yeah, it's going to take time, but we got to start with this step. You know, the journey of 1,000 miles begins with one. You got to start with, and again, nod to endurance cyclists. Yeah, that's, you know, 1,000+ miles, but you got to get one at a time. And I think that's the allure. And so, yeah, I think there's so much power in not just the sport of cycling, but the way it's represented. So in films, in everyday narrative and accounts, you know, the more that we share, the more we connect. We all have such dynamic and complex and robust backgrounds and experiences and wisdom to offer, but if we don't share it and connect and have the storytelling dialogue that we need to have, it's not going to go anywhere. And I think that's very much also a part of social advocacy and representation and organizing and change ultimately.
One of my colleagues has this beautiful metaphor. Her name is Sharifa Joka, and works in equity and inclusion in theater and arts and production. And this metaphor she presented a while back, I think applies to so many things. She says, you know, if I am getting ready to go to the store and, you know, I get my phone, I get my wallet, and then I'm looking for my keys, and I can't find my keys, I don't throw my hands up and say, I guess I'm not going to the store today. She's like, I tear that room apart. I turn it upside down because I know that the keys are in the room and I'm committed to finding them. And I hope that people like whether it is in hiring committees, whether it is in like equity and inclusion and community efforts, and whether it's in competitive cycling, that every single one of those people wakes up and says, yeah, the keys are in the room. It's our responsibility to make sure they know they're welcome here, right? To find them. And so when you know, this question of like, why Stamina Racing Collective, fewer than 15% of licensed USA cyclists identify as women. and even fewer identify as BIPOC. It's 8 to 10%. And those numbers are like a little shaky because they haven't done great surveying. And so, we as a team and as a collective want to show up and demonstrate that, yeah, the keys are in the room. You haven't been looking hard enough. You need to keep working. And that is our hope. And I think that is a political act. I hope that people on this team, the people who ride with us and engage with us, can show up as their authentic selves, right? And I think that there will be some people who say like, yeah, everything else in my life is political. I just want to show up and ride, right? And for some people don't have that option in the same way. And so our job is to try and make it easier, to try and make it safer and more comfortable for those folks who aren't as safe in other spaces. And so that is my hope with this collective, and in the community, that everyone else would see the keys are already in the room.
And if we can't find the keys, maybe we don't need a door. Maybe there shouldn't be a door. Maybe it should just be a nice like archway and just call it that. My parents used to have these wooden beads on every doorway, which made sneaking into the kitchen very, very difficult, just so you know. But like, maybe there doesn't need to be a lock that needs a key, and I think that's also part of the conversation. There are some spaces where there are doors that they don't belong. It needs to be just free flowing access to certain things for communities.
That's so on point. And I think one of the things that I am recognizing more and more, I mean, I've been organizing within the movement for Black Lives ecosystem since the beginning. And one of the things that like many of our folks need is to get a different relationship with like their world around them, with like their neighborhood, like just with the state as a whole, and just like actually be able to engage in the public sphere from a place of curiosity, from like a place of play and joy. And I think for at least, especially within the organizing ecosystem, I'll say definitely in the state, I think only recently we're like coming to these conclusions. And we've had 3 massive moments of the whirlwind in the Twin Cities in regards to state-sanctioned violence against unarmed Black men, that people who were literally like occupying the 4th precinct at 17 are now in a different place in their lives, and feeling very like weary. So I think it's important. I think that there is something there about the healing element. I think particularly of being on a bike, of cycling, that can help with the repair that needs to happen with the relationship between like our communities and ourselves as Black folks. I think the other thing that I'll say is that when I heard the question about bikes as a vehicle of social change, I thought absolutely. And I also thought about how bikes can also represent social change in a not so great way. I'm in New York right now, and when you're in a neighborhood that has a city bike stand, or like what we have in Minnesota is nice rides, that can represent, a deterioration of a community. And so I'm really curious about like repairing Black folks in urban areas in particular, like their relationships with bikes, which have suddenly become this like massive symbol of gentrification. It's like bikes, it's Whole Foods and Urban Outfitters, and then it's like, it's a wrap. So like, how can we like repair that? How can we like reclaim bikes for ourselves, and take up space in these communities that we see our folks leaving and being priced out of? So that was just something that was on the top of my head too.
Yeah, I would also agree, like in the most literal sense, bikes are a vehicle for social change. But I remember kind of having that, I don't know, it's a weird moment to describe, but I was at a protest and I had my bike, and it was before we started all of the bike service stuff, and I was just there to protest. And then somebody just yells out, "Bikers to the front." And I was like, oh God, I have a job to do now. Next thing I know, my job is to stop traffic on 35. So I think we all know what happened next. And yeah, so that really came into like another job of like, oh, this is something, this is not just, oh, I'm getting around. This is a tool that I'm going to use to literally help people and get from A to B, bring whatever I need there. It's just, yeah. And when things go south, I'd rather be on my bike cutting across everything than running. And yeah, so when everything happened, I remember pulling bikes aside to the side of the road, making sure that if people were able to get back to their bikes, that they did, just like, yo, grab it, get out of here. Yeah, they are a thing for social change. And then it's kind of hard to be mad at people while you're biking if you do like a scheduled group ride, I've noticed, because I have some friends who I'm just like, you know, if we're not biking, I really don't want to just like hang out with you, but if we're biking, like, you're my best friend. So I really think biking just brings us together in the best ways. And yeah, really, like a good bike ride with anybody can change your perception of them.
Wesley, it's all those endorphins being released as you're riding, is what I think.
Yeah.
I'll mention that in our club, we probably have about 40% white membership. And I think this club and these rides have become an opportunity to have conversations you wouldn't normally have, to talk about the issues that are out there in the streets, to talk about national issues. I can't begin to tell you how many times the whole Trump era BS came up on a weekly basis. Sometimes we'd be sitting out here on my deck at the table, maybe half hour, 45 minutes over the time we're supposed to start the ride, because everybody's out there with an opinion and wants to talk about the issues. And I tell my wife, you know, I have a definition for all of these guys and gals that come and ride with me. They're my playmates. I go back to being a kid, and this is an opportunity to play with friends that I know and that I feel comfortable with. And, you know, I go out there and get on a bike and we go 30 miles, 40 miles, 50 miles, at 20 miles an hour, and just have a wonderful day of it. And then when you come home, you're nice and tired. You get to eat, you get to shower, and you get to eat anything you want to. And I'm 80 years old, so I have to watch what I eat, but I eat anything I want to. And that's an important part of cycling. And I tell people that you've got to have something that's going to offset the part of life that just turns out to be total turmoil, total frustration. And that's what cycling's been for me for over 60 years.
thank you all for your answers. That was really wonderful, and you offered some really insightful questions to think about and experiences and perspectives. So thank you. Is there anything that makes you hopeful about the future of biking or the biking community in Minnesota?
I mean, this panel, is a very small representation of so many things to be excited about the future of cycling. I think the more conversations we have, the more open we are to hearing the experiences of others, I think continues to shed light on the things that are going well, but also the things that we got to keep working on, and continuing to strive for these ideals of diversity in cycling and open spaces and taking up space and just dialogue. I don't know. I just can't stress enough. Maybe it's because I'm a psychologist. Maybe it's because I'm a Libra. I don't know, but I like to talk a lot and I like to share stories and I like to hear stories of other people. I think that just really gets at how we're connected. I mean, there's so many things that we're bombarded with in terms of messaging that would lead us to believe how different we are from one another. And that just is not helpful. It's not helpful. It creates division, divide where there doesn't need to be divide. And I think the future looks great if this is just a small representation of the people who are doing the work, whether that's on teams, whether that's in bike shops, whether that's at organizational levels or elected official levels, or just in your communities. There's so many spaces that, that we all need to be in, sharing the things that we've shared here today. I'm also an optimist, so like by default. So I'm always looking at, well, this is going really well, but how can we make it better?
Well, I think, the future of cycling is not going to do anything but grow. What I've seen over the years leads me to believe that you're going to see more and more people on bicycles in the future, because we can't continue to build cars, we can't continue to fill up freeways, we can't continue to burn fuel. I worked 19 years for a member of Congress here locally in Minneapolis. I worked on transportation, so we helped provide the funding for the LRT system. We've helped provide funding for all of the improvements on the freeways, the bus system, the electric bus system. So I have seen some progress over the years, and I see in other cities progress, but I also see a lot of people looking for a source of independence when it comes to getting from point A to point B, just like Wesley was talking about. You just want to be able to get there the most efficient way you can. And by the way, Wesley, I've ridden in Chicago many, many times. Actually, it's fun. And riding the lakefront is fun. Because it's such a mix of people and such a mix of cyclists.
I rode the lakefront during the polar vortex of 2016.
Oh, you're a brave person.
Worst idea I've ever had. Half ice, half regret.
Yeah. And for the young lady who lives in New York, my oldest daughter and her husband lived in Queens, Richmond Hill. So we would go out there, spend 2 or 3 weeks with them, and have to get out and chase the buses with my bike. And I know that's a big thing in New York. These kids like to chase the buses. And I got with this group that was chasing the bus, and went home and told my wife, and she had a little, excuse the expression, fit. But she just had an S fit. And I said, but it was an experience. And that's what it is. It's an experience. You go out there and you do these crazy things sometimes just so that I mean, even bike racing is an experience. I did a race from Western Minnesota to Eastern Minnesota back in the middle 80s. And there were only two of us out there, the only two black cyclists on the whole race. And I remember riding alongside a guy that looked over at us and said, "Wow, I didn't know black people rode bicycles. I thought you guys just played basketball and rap music." And I kind of looked at him like, and we just rolled away from it. I mean, we just literally blew him out the water. So, I mean, there's just, there's times when you're out there, you want to do things, and whether they're rational or not, it's part of the cycling community. It's part of the experience. And it's important to have that experience.
Shout out to you. I love the old school New York stories. I'm a St. Paul girl now, but I think something that excites me about the future is about the fact that Gen Z is so hyper aware of the environmental impacts of so much that I really see folks making a concerted effort also as a political statement to be on bikes and be pushing that work forward, recognizing the sustainability of it. And I think that the other thing that I'm excited about is that this last year we've been outside more than ever. I have never been outside in the winter as much as I have this winter. I am seeking it out. You asked me to, I'm trying it all. I just did the little sledding down the hill for the first time with a real sled about 4 weeks ago. So we are committed in I think that we are in a massive love affair with the outside right now, and that people are more willing than ever to go out and try new things because of just the real life situation with the pandemic. And I think that this is a cultural shift that won't necessarily go away as the pandemic gets better. So I'm just looking forward to more people seeking out biking, because why not? We love to be outside now.
I'm really looking forward for the future of kind of the takeover of cycling with black athletes. Just saying, black athletes take up 75 and 90% of the NFL and NBA. And I mean, sure, there's not many black hockey players, but PK Subban is awesome. The Williams sisters destroy everybody in tennis. Tiger Woods brought a whole generation of people out to play golf. I wouldn't have played golf if it wasn't for Tiger. I didn't like it, but heck, I still played. And that's already a feat in itself. Hey, he got me out to try something that is traditionally a white sport. And I was just like, oh, yeah, this is just boring and slow pace. Can we just drive the cart and hit the ball at the same time? No, that's not cool. All right, we'll just stick with this. But yeah, when I got into cycling, I didn't know of Major Taylor at the time. And also, I couldn't really name a professional cyclist other than Lance Armstrong. And we all know where that went. So I was just like, well, here's the chance. With this year of everybody buying bikes, how many kids are going to fall in love with cycling and just destroy everybody growing up? And it's like, oh yeah, this is LeBron James, the cyclist, and he rides a BMX bike in the Tour de France and he still beats everybody, and he does it in jean shorts. I can't wait for that day, and I really feel like it's coming. I know it's a little wild to say yeah, he's on a BMX bike, jean shorts, but I think there will be those radical just changes of the sport thanks to the newfound love of cycling in black people. Major Taylor shot everybody out of the water once he was allowed to race with them. Jackie Robinson did the exact same thing. So it's just like, there's kind of a trend going on, and I'd like to see that continue with cycling.
Wesley, I think if my kids are any indication, they're 8, 6, and 4. And I have my bike and my trainer, and I'm on that thing. And my 8-year-old's like, can I get a trainer? Can I ride too? Can we just like do a side-by-side situation? And I'm like, yeah, sponsors, let's get some extra stuff. But also, like, the more it's out there, the more it's in front of people, the more people do what I did. I'm like, well, I want to try that too. All right, how do I get involved? How can I do it? To your point, Wesley, just continuing to grow the number of Black and BIPOC athletes in the sport. And I think it's going to be huge, absolutely.
And I might mention, Wesley, there are 3 to 4 national champions in bike racing now who are African American. You have Sean Bahati out in California. You have the Williams brothers out in California. And both of them have been up here to race when they used to have the races here in Minneapolis. And they blew everybody out of the water. And people were just, mouths were dropping all over the place. So there are a lot of Black athletes out there now who have turned to cycling that are going to be very well known in the bike racing community.
Well, I am so excited, and this group makes me very hopeful. I am looking forward to riding with some of the Major Taylor crew, if they'll have some stamina folks. And I'm not just saying it. We're really gonna get out there with you. And please, let's do a 50-mile day and get our butts kicked, and then like eat roughly our weight in pizza.
Well, I don't know if you get your butt kicked. There's a lot of old people in this club, but we'll hang with you.
Yeah, we would love that. Wesley and Paige, please come along. We would love to ride with y'all any day.
I'll do my best.
There's well over 70 Major Taylor bicycling clubs nationally now. Every major city has a Major Taylor club in it. And next year, in 2022, in Indianapolis, Indiana, is going to be the National Major Taylor Club Ride, which means it's going to be thousands of Major Taylor Club members out for a major event.
That's amazing. Such good work.
So speaking of the future, I'd just like to close, if each of you could share, if folks are interested in getting involved in the work that you're doing, how they might be able to connect with you or like stay up to date about what you're working on. And if there are any major like projects or rides or things like that that any of you are looking forward to.
Okay, I'll start it off. Our club is working on an event. We were hoping to have it maybe this year, but it may not happen because of COVID-19, or it's going to depend on where COVID-19 is at that point as far as vaccinations. But we're planning to have a Major Taylor Diva Ride, which means we're going to invite the women of Major Taylor from other clubs around the country to come to Minneapolis and experience the bicycle facilities here in Minneapolis and the ride. And we're going to ride for 2 or 3 days. We have not set a date. We have not put together any major plans outside of routes. But, and we're of course going to wait until we find out where this whole COVID-19 thing is going to be for this year. That also may be set back to 2022, and we'll make sure that all of you are informed, because we have some very awesome cyclists around the country. There is a Black woman who really is the first and probably one of the very few nationally known bike racers, Alicia McGowan. And she has come to Minnesota on a couple of occasions, and our club has hosted her because she's come to race. So we're going to try to have her come as well. And as I understand now, there's a group that has formed around her, and they're doing very well in the circuit. So we're hoping to have this event either this year or next year, and we'll make sure that all of you are aware of it. We have a Facebook page, of course. We have an Instagram account, of course. but we'll keep everybody informed.
I'm looking forward to that. So yeah, Free Black Dirt, we have a year's worth of programming that's going to be centering abolition and nature and liberation. So we started off with an abolition play studio, and in the summer, a component of that work is going to be embodiment. And so we're going to have 3 bike rides this summer, something for Black August, something for Juneteenth, and we're gonna have like a special retreat. And you will bike to there, stay overnight, and bike back if you want. And that'll be happening in July. So yeah, lots of stuff in the works. We're on the typical social media platforms at Free Black Dirt.
So stoked about that programming. Can't wait to hear more and help amplify all that Major Taylor and that Free Black Dirt is doing. Stamina Racing Collective has some upcoming programming, of course, like everything else, sort of waiting to see what happens with COVID. But this year we are going to do some community programming. So the first program will focus on getting free bike tools, lights, locks, helmets into the hands of BIPOC cyclists to promote ridership and also increase safety for BIPOC riders. And then the second piece that we're doing is focusing on getting more FTW riders to the starting line of races. So for folks who are race curious but haven't made the leap for whatever reason, we want to provide community resources and tools so that those folks can feel prepared come race day, and then we'll be their team for a day. And so are excited to engage and connect with folks through both of those programs. We hope that it leads to a more inclusive and a safer bike community in the Twin Cities for everybody. And looking forward to it. So keep up with us on the socials, Stamina Racing Collective. Check out our website. And if you want to be a part of it or help out, please email us and be happy to connect.
And stay connected. There's just updates happening all the time, and we just love sharing it. And also look forward to, when it's safe, doing a lot of in-person rides and having guest rides and stuff. So just really excited about everything that's coming up.
I guess this year I'm getting back at it, brushing off the dust off the race bikes and starting my race career back up again. I've recently was elected the vice president of the MCF, Minnesota Cycling Federation. Kind of forgot to mention that at the beginning, sorry. So I'd figure it's most appropriate that I get back in the ring with that. And then, like I said earlier, we're working on a feature-length documentary of the normalization of Black people in cycling. And we're going to be going all across the country for that, literally from New York to California. Unfortunately, we're going to be flying, not biking, because a lot of camera equipment, but it'll be a lot of fun meeting all these great, cool Black people who are just changing the complete industry of what is the norm of what it is when it comes to cycling. And that is one project that I'm super excited to getting off the ground here in a few weeks. And yeah.
That all sounds wonderful. We're so excited to help uplift and amplify all of your projects. And thank you all for being so insightful and candid and honest with us today on this panel. You're all doing amazing work, and I hope everyone has learned something watching. Emily, if you have any last things.
I just want to say, echo everything Maya said, and just how grateful we all are that you joined us today for this panel. I know that everyone who watches it will learn something. I certainly learned things from each of you today, and I'm so excited to keep connected and keep following the amazing work that you all are doing and supporting it in the ways that we can. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Sincerely a pleasure to be here. I've appreciated the conversation, and also similarly hope that the audience gets something, anything out of this time. But I think my main hope for their takeaway, for anyone's takeaway, is this renewed feeling of authenticity in spaces, and the knowledge that cycling can provide that, in addition to freedom and social change and connection and community. So it's been awesome, and hope to continue the conversation.
Okay, I guess we'll see all of you on the road next summer.
Yeah.